All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Wrench Factor. I'm Jake Hall, the Manufacturing Millennial, one of the hosts for this awesome podcast and conversation where we get to go to you to have great conversations with leaders, people in the industry that are making a change, and having a lot of fun conversations along the way. Now, I get to introduce a friend of mine that I've known in the industry for about 6 years now. And it's been incredible watching the journey that they have had over time. We have Audrey Van De Castle, Senior Director of Operational Excellence Technology at Stanley Black Decker. Audrey, great to have you back. Great to have another conversation with you.
For sure. Nice to be here, Jake. Always a pleasure.
You know, to kick us off with, you are constantly growing and advancing. It's been incredible watching your career. What is, I have to ask this, what does the Senior Director of Operational Excellence Technology do at SBD?
It's a fun question and one that I can hopefully shed some light on. I've practiced this line, so you have to let me know how it is. At a very, very high level, my team builds systems and solutions that collect, contextualize, analyze, and visualize data and processes from our shop floors and our plants mainly, sometimes our distribution centers as well around the globe. So what that looks like in practice is really anything from a solution for a 5S audit digitally, or a solution that takes, KPIs from all of our plants and rolls it up for an executive leadership view. So we kind of have a dual purpose in serving our shop floor and manufacturing leadership population, as well as our executive leadership population within our supply chain.
I love it. So we talked, I think it was 3 years ago when we were on the last podcast and conversation together. And we're talking about data. We were talking about the connected workforce and how companies are really needing to focus on leveraging data in this new world of manufacturing, where we're going from just a physical process to understanding that a lot of manufacturing happens digitally. Now, I know at your team, you guys are really focusing on some new stuff that you want to deploy, but to step back real quick, where is this industry changing? Like, if you were to go back and say where we are today and go back 3 years ago and look at the difference, what are you seeing really as the big growth that we're seeing in our industry when it comes to understanding information, understanding data, understanding the technology that we're working with from a high level?
Yeah, I think even 3 years ago, even maybe 5-6 years ago, when we talk about COVID timeframe, when I think about what's the catalyst for some of these changes that I've seen, I really think COVID was a big catalyst for a lot of things, but also for what I see as almost a cultural change and a mindset change within a lot of people in manufacturing, where I think maybe there used to be this mindset that this is how we always done it, or it works this way. If it ain't broke, why fix it, right? But it seems like a lot more people are awake to and in tune to the fact that computers can do math for us, right? Computers can do a lot of things for us, and why not use them? Why not go digital on a lot of things? So I know that there's always been this trope where it's like, manufacturing full of old people, dusty, dangerous, dirty, right? And sure, I think there are a lot of really great people who are maybe older in manufacturing, but guess what? They also want to use computers, right?
Yeah.
They've got a computer in their pocket. They understand the value of going digital. At this point, it's 2026. So I think that that's one of the things that I really have seen change across the board. And even when I talk with peers in other industries of manufacturing, everyone wants this, right? Everyone wants their life to be easier. And a really easy way for us to make a manufacturing population's life easier is by digitizing all of the things that they do that makes their life not as fun, right? Or super tedious, or a task that they have to take out of one system and go into another system, right? So there's a lot of ways we can solve some of those pain points with digital. And I think that people have done that enough now that they see, yes, this is something that I want to engage with and that I want to run for. So that's one of the big things I think that I've seen shift over the past couple of years. Is that's really not the way that it is anymore, that people don't want to go digital with things, right?
Yeah, I think, beforehand, it was a while where we had to get people on this idea of thinking digitally. I think in many cases, people are thinking in a digital mindset. Now, really, the thing that we're struggling with is having people look at it the right way, going at the right approach, because if you go at it from the wrong angle, you're almost digging yourself a hole rather than progressing yourself forward. What are you learning from your team, from your takeaway? You're working with a global team in your role. What are some of the big takeaways that from a leadership perspective that you're learning in this industry as you're going out and you're looking at this project?
I think that a lot of the work that my team that my team does specifically is equip people with tools to either get data or to do something with their data, right?
Yeah.
And I can give you as many shiny tools as you want. Quite frankly, I work for a tool company. We can give you a lot of really great tools, right? If we're talking physical tools. But I think that without people understanding the why or the how,
Mhm.
I see things fall on their face all the time, right? So where we've really changed our approach is that we've partnered with some of our other teams within our COEs to really change the hearts and the minds as well, or to prepare and train the hearts and the minds of people, right? You could have my team of technologists training people about why have a tier meeting while we're helping you go digital with your tier meetings. Or you could have the team that actually wrote the standard and truly understands the manufacturing and is truly in the weeds with the plants, kind of explaining that to them, or having their CI team start there. So that's one of the things that we've really focused on is we're not just going to come in with a tool. We're going to come in and you're going to learn the why we're doing these practices and behaviors in the first place.
I
Because
want to dive into that. So I think it's great. You're hitting the point where you have the technology, but you need to explain the why behind this technology that you've learned to deploy. So dive into that a little bit more. What when you're going to these teams and you're talking about enabling a workforce to be able to collect and act on data, how
yeah,
does that approach? Because I think that ties in a lot, with what we talk about here in the maintenance side as well, is why it's so important to collect and look at data. What's the
right.
strategy? Like, how do you establish that mindset?
Yeah, I think that it's really helpful to have real examples, right? So whatever it is that you're trying to convince folks of, I don't want to say be in pilot purgatory forever, right? But run a pilot with a trusted site or a site that trusts you or that is a little bit maybe more ahead of the curve, early adopters, and get some of those wins that you can share with other teams. I think hearing that other people are doing it within your organization, that FOMO is a real thing to leverage, right? Um, FOMO being fear of missing out.
Yeah.
The other thing is really helping people to establish a winning format, a winning structure, right? Don't just slap a digital thing onto however you used to do it if how you used to do it didn't work, right? Because at the end of the day, going digital isn't going to solve being accountable, right? I'm not going to make you magically accountable by giving you a digital tool. I can help make it more visible when people aren't accountable by using a digital tool, right?
Yeah.
But you really want to kind of help change that mindset and culture. So teaching people why looking at data every day and then what to do with that data once it is not where you want it to be and how to use the data to kind of devise a plan to act on it. Like real world examples really help there. Walking people through those sort of exercises will really help. And we typically will see more or better sustained adoption or further spread within a site when people actually really start to affect the change, augmented, made faster by a digital tool, right?
Yeah.
You're taking out a lot of the like tedious work of the process and giving them the compass that points them right in the right direction. But then you also really have to help them understand the why and the how,
Yeah.
because a lot of times people are like, but I've always done it like this. Jake sometimes responds when I put this work order on his desk, right? That's 50% success rate, right? So I think that really finding those real pain points and real examples can help win people over.
I love the quote where you said, digitalizing a process doesn't matter if the process to begin with isn't the good. Like I think like for me, I don't think I've ever heard that phrase before, but man, like immediately that brought up just like so many memories of working with customers in the past. We were going out there, we were doing digital modernization stuff, either doing SCADA or MES or data collection and deployment. But like it makes so much sense when you just simply that simple phrase, just because you're digitalizing a process, it doesn't matter. And I could directly relate that. So do you have an example, of where we're seeing that, or what was a memory that you had when you're going out there and you're looking at that of like, this doesn't even matter. Like the way you're going out there and you're deploying this, it doesn't matter. We could do it perfectly digital, but it's not going to make any sense if we don't reevaluate the why we're doing it.
Maybe an example I can think of is I think there's been like times where we've done Kaizens or time balancing studies or things like that where we've augmented them with digital, but really questioned steps in a process and asked people, why are you doing it this way? Like, why is this step here? And no one can explain it. No one's like, oh, that's how we've always done it, right? Or that's because we used to get it this way from a supplier, and now they only come in 50% this way from a supplier, but we still do it just to make sure or to double check, right? So like I'm thinking about certain quality processes and stuff like that that might just kind of be grandfathered in almost, or well, we've always done it that way. So people sometimes won't even question the process, right? Something like that is what pops to mind. Or even, we've had a lot of conversations and change management around like specific KPIs, like why are we looking at specific KPIs? Or, hey, we've always used this instead of this. We don't want to use this because we've always used this, right? But really trying to help people understand why you would look at a certain KPI is another that pops to mind.
So when you you talked about having FOMO, and you're going out there, you're deploying solutions, and sites don't want to miss out on what you're doing because other places are doing that. You're kind of creating this cultural shift of wanting to now do something rather than being resistant of it. Do you feel it's easier now to get more people on board when it comes to deploying new types of processes and solution when it comes to collecting or acting on data, because it's either a generational switch, it's a mindset switch? Like, where do you think we are in the world of the snowball or the flywheel going, where it took a long time to get that snowball made, and then we're slowly start pushing it? And are we at the point now where we could just simply kind of almost, it's going downhill and it's just going to get bigger and bigger? Or are we still trying to make that snowball into a good enough shape where it's not going to completely fall apart the moment we stop working on it?
I think, at least within my bubble, I think we're at like the top of the hill rolling down. I think people are there, right? I think that what I find is like people are looking for these solutions anyway, and they're typically like, yay, I don't have to keep looking because it's already here, right? And as opposed to previously, it's like, well, why would I use this, right? Or they're asking different questions, like, when can I have it? How do I implement it, right? What are the tips and tricks or lessons learned from other sites, right? So it's almost like it almost isn't even this, I have to sell it as much anymore. It's just like an awareness thing. I got to make sure you're aware of it, because I know as soon as you're aware of it, it's going to solve problems that you have, pain points that you have, and you're going to want the solution, right?
Yeah. When we look at data, is the best data tool, I mean, are we leveraging mobile devices as the best data tool? Are you finding out there that it's screen, like, what are you looking at when it looks at collecting and acting and visualizing data? What have you learned from an enterprise global letter on the best way to truly make data make sense to the individual?
I think that I love that you asked about devices, because I think that that's such a forgotten step a lot of times in this population. When I came into this space at SBD 6-7 years ago, no one was thinking about solving for access to these solutions for this population, especially our hourly population, people out there on a line or running a machine, right? Who typically maybe don't even have a digital identity inside of your identity system, right? So we really had to solve for the physical devices that people are going to use to capture this data or to understand this data, right? And how do they safely and securely access it to adhere to our cybersecurity policies and all of that, right? So we can use whatever devices are already out there. We try and make it easy for sites to integrate with our solutions. But if we're providing devices to a site, it's typically an iPad, right? Because it's mobile. It can be stationary if we want it to be, if we give it the right stand, right? It's powerful enough for the things that we need to do on it for the most part. But then when it comes to really like visualizing the data, I would say, sure, people will have maybe a mobile application or something like that on an iPad or a phone. But then we also will employ like large digital screens, essentially TV screens that are hooked up to computers to run stuff like a Power BI report or something like that. That's always open on the plant floor.
Love it. With the wrench factor being a conversation around maintenance. And I think a lot of times maintenance is a very, I don't want to say it's an unforgotten process or profession within the industry, but it often feels a lot of times like it's a last minute thought. It's not something that always gets the flashy part of, the process within the industry. When it comes to collecting and enabling data, and I don't know if you have any examples that you can go back to, but when it comes to the teams that keep the processes running on the production floor and the groups of leaderships that are out there, how are you seeing data really enable this next generation of maintenance workers? Because we were having a conversation, years ago, and coming out of COVID, everyone was retiring, and all these companies were struggling with the idea of, wait a second, we just lost a bunch of people, and we never had any type of backup of their skill sets, their tribal knowledge, and I think a lot of companies have done a better job. They learned from that hurt from 2020, 2021, and 2022, and a lot of it left. So I think we're doing better now. But what have you seen when it comes to data, acting on data from the maintenance and that production ownership side?
Yeah. I think people always, whenever I talk with folks within maintenance, they're always like, maintenance always gets blamed for everything, right? So whenever we're putting like downtime reasons, like, let's be really specific about what we mean when we're going to blame maintenance for downtime, right? But I think that's one of them, having clear ways to look at your data to say, okay, if maintenance is the cause of my downtime, what's the double click into that? What's really the cause? Is it something that an operator could have done? Was it autonomous maintenance that we missed, right? I also think that part of it is communication, right? Not even just collection of data. Sure, there's a lot of data you can collect around volume of communication and time to closure and stuff like that. But even just being able to get an automatic alert when a machine goes down as a maintenance manager is probably going to be a lot faster than what you used to do, which might have been a walkie, which might have been someone physically walking to your cave in the back of the plant, right? Whatever it might be. So I think that even just speeding up those communication cycles and enabling standard communication cycles in the form of something like a tier meeting that maintenance is and should be invited to can really help, just without even just the accountability and time to resolution for a maintenance manager, right? All of that can make it easier. And then I think the really big, exciting kind of opportunity on the horizon is, to use a buzzword, AI, right? Which I think we talked about: trash processes in, trash digitization out, trash data into AI, trash answers out of AI, right? So I think there's a real careful look that companies need to take at their data before they start implementing AI in a place like a plant floor, right? But I do think that AI is a really powerful tool for us to like scrub work order notes. What did the technician do to fix the machine 3 months ago, 6 months ago when it happened? And I think that the way that AI can kind of do the natural language processing and suggest things back to users is a really exciting prospect, particularly for maintenance, because when I was working a lot on digitized training, I would always get from particularly maintenance, well, how do I train people on troubleshooting? It's a real question, right? It is a tough thing to train on, but you dump a bunch of data into an AI and it can make some sense of it, right? So if you have historic written or verbatim work orders or notes from a technician, that's like a gold mine for AI to be able to offer better solutions, coupled with something like the manual from the manufacturer or the maintenance schedule suggested from the manufacturer, right? There's a lot that we can do there, I think, to improve it.
Nice. All right. One final question as we wrap things up. When you look at the industry and looking forward into what's capable, what we're seeing, what are you most excited about with what the future has in store when it comes to data, when it comes to training, when it comes to the technology that's out there? What is keeping you on your edge of your seat? Like, man, that's going to be really exciting one day to have or to see deployed.
I think AI is exciting for the right useful use cases, right? I think that accurate, trustable data is something that I'm very excited for, right? And I think there's people that are within data organizations, even if you're not within manufacturing, right? Where sometimes you look under the cover and you're like, whew, right? Don't want to share this data, right? But I always will remind folks, right? It's better than what we were coming from. It's better than where we were, right? There's progress here, right? So I think like really true, accurate looks at performance and output and quality in a way that we really haven't fully grasped before, especially in manufacturing industries, which are often kind of behind the curve of technology implementation and infrastructure implementation, right? I think there's a whole world of insights and possibilities that we'll be able to unlock just by getting better data from our plant floors, quite frankly.
I love that. And especially like eliminating the hallucinations that we often see when it comes to the data and the processes. I think it's one of those things is with any subject matter expert that's out there, they have to look at something and understand what it looks like. And I think that's where the expertise, that's where the human value still is going to come from. But data, but AI being able to take data and push it at you at I look at it as it's a massive DOI, right? You're going out there and you have a bunch of variables and you're constantly doing stuff and you're seeing what fits. And you can look at it and say, that doesn't even make any sense. But when you look at something, you say, okay, I'm in the right area, the ballpark now. Now I can use my experience to look at that stuff. That's where we're seeing some really exciting stuff happen.
Totally. And I think like the elimination of the manual things people used to have to do to get to that point, right? We're basically giving a lot of time back to do way more valuable things by getting that accurate data, by automating those 6 steps between disparate systems, right? I think there's a lot that excites me there for sure.
But then as well is the time to reaction, right? Because those 6 or 7 steps took days, weeks, months to collect. All of a sudden, we can have an actionable meeting 24 hours after a process happened to make real time. Just like that's where I think just the data allowing us to react to make real time decisions or faster decisions is where I think a lot of it has. I think that's where a lot of times we got going back to early on, getting stuck in pilot purgatory. And a lot of those areas is because it took so long to understand when you made a change, what the results actually were, where now all of a sudden we can really begin to see what happens.
Or you're only looking at, again, this much of the process and you're like, oh, I fixed this much, but this still sucks and this still sucks. So they still don't enjoy it. It's still not a fun process, right? So really taking a step back and being like, what is the actual full process here? And how can I affect the whole thing to make it better instead of just the little part that I initially thought in my pilot, right?
Awesome. Well, it is always a pleasure. Audrey, thank you so much for taking some time today to have a conversation with us here on the Wrench Factor. I hope to eventually get you on a live one of these, hopefully at a future show, and Automate and IMTS, and have a conversation on stage with you as well. If you're watching, I would highly recommend connect with Audrey on LinkedIn. She is an incredibly knowledgeable individual, has a lot of fun stories as well that we don't have enough time for today. So hopefully we can have a round 2 of these in the future. But thank you for joining us today on the Wrench Factor and having these conversations. Stay tuned for another episode. And of course, keep an eye out for the blog write-up we're going to have on this conversation as well. I'm Jake Hall, the Manufacturing Millennial. We'll see you guys again soon.